So what the media is probably going to focus on is protests. So again, this event, based on what we're finding, looked like it was started getting planned about a month ago. The governor's spokespeople put out screenshots of emails that they sent, supposedly trying to get tribal leaders to come to this. But in like a very unprofessional and not a way you get a leader of a sovereign country to come do anything. It was sort of a, hey, we've got this deal. We're running. You should show up if you want, maybe. So anyway, it wasn't like a thing where it was built with them. So of course people don't like that. Don't respond to that. And what it provoked instead was protests. So for folks that don't know what the McGirt decision was, in 2020, the Supreme Court held that United States treaties ceding most of eastern Oklahoma to Native American tribes were still binding for the purpose of determining criminal jurisdictions. So this is a huge deal for tribal rights and sovereignty. For Oklahoma, what that does is it really shifts who has the power in the criminal legal system. And I spent a couple years working with the ACLU and some others on criminal justice reform, and district attorneys have incredible power in our system. These are elected positions. We are one of the only countries in the world that elect district attorneys. They have tremendous discretion to enforce the law however they see fit. The way that plays out in Oklahoma is they prosecute and punish people far beyond what any other state in the country, and any other country in the world for that matter, does to its people who commit crimes. I get that punishment narrative appeals to Oklahomans on some visceral level, but it doesn't work. Oklahoma, like I said, has been number one in incarceration for a long time. We've been number one locking up women for 25 years. If incarceration was the solution to crime and the way to prevent it and the way to stop it from happening in the first place, we should be one of the most peaceful societies in the history of the universe, and we are not. So on its face, the way Oklahoma runs its criminal justice, criminal legal system is bad. It is not good. It is not working. It is not something we should try to protect or emulate or replicate or continue. So now what McGirt does is it really shifts the onus of who runs the criminal justice system to the tribes, but also to the federal government. And this is like an important factor because the federal government, for all its problems, tends to run a tighter ship on the criminal legal side of things. Most of our people who are locked up in jails and prisons are local, jurisdictions. So it is not the federal government that is driving necessarily mass incarceration. It's actually the states and counties. And so when you insert the federal government into it, they tend to be less punitive. They have a lot more resources often. Their programs tend to be a lot better. It's just a better system overall in how they treat people who commit crimes. Tribes, I don't have good data on them, but based on philosophical differences, the fact that they don't have to build massive prisons all over the place in tribal territories, my guess is they operate similarly or on a different philosophical basis. So here are some quotes, tweets and stuff. They're, worth following. This Brett is let me see, Native American attorney, got a good following in Oklahoma, definitely interesting follow for keeping track of a lot of that stuff. But so anyway, this panel, mostly guys, mostly white guys, lots of district attorneys. Let me see if I can find the invitation, because I think it's worth looking at like where this thing came from, because it wasn't like, this wasn't like a deal where they just put out a thing and really trying to hear everybody. So here is the invitation that was going around on social media. So Steve Kunzweiler, who's the district attorney in Tulsa, he is kind of the main organizer of it. But they got, I mean, it's all district attorneys basically. And then the governor's special counsel dedicated to tribal affairs, and then the solicitor general. And then Tulsa County Sheriff Vic Regalado, who loves the camera and doesn't miss an opportunity to be seen at something. The other people that are putting this on are advocacy groups, Marsy's Law, which is not a great deal. It sounds great, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but it's not a great deal. It's a billionaire-driven victims' rights advocacy organization that basically just, I mean, like I said, I'll show you kind of what it breaks down, but basically it just gives victims a massive advantage that they don't need in our legal system to like ratchet up punishment. Doesn't help victims like in any material way that I can see. Just puts them in the process more to, I don't know, have to go through the legal system, which in America isn't great and doesn't tend to help things given our crime rates and issues we have. So, yeah. So Marsy's Law, and then a couple other advocacy groups, the Department of Corrections. Anyway, so it's very law enforcement heavy and state law enforcement heavy. So it's not, I don't think they're coming from like a great place as far as, what they intend to do. Non-Doc had a good article here on it, worth checking out. A lot of links and other stuff. But the big complaint was there was no tribal representation. So you've got, again, a panel full of powerful district attorneys that are telling everyone what is wrong with this. And what the argument is coming down to is, and why they did this, and really what it seems like they got out of this is they are trying to pit victims of crime against the tribes for the purpose of consolidating power in the Oklahoma criminal legal system. I don't know what aspect of our system serves victims particularly well. Again, I've done a lot of criminal justice reform work. I've listened to victims. And in fact, like one panel I really remember was one on the north side of Tulsa. And many of the stories I heard out of this were about domestic violence, which is one of the crimes that they like to allude to that McGirt's going to mess up because now, we're suddenly not going to prosecute those crimes, which isn't true. But that's like the fear they're trying to stoke. But what I found listening to victims was that the ultra punitive system actually isn't that great because it prevents people from wanting to like report someone. It's like in like many cases of violent or near violent crime, it's like there's some sort of conflict that you're trying to resolve, and people call 911 because that's what we've designated as the crisis resolution line. And all they can do is come out and arrest people and subject them to the criminal justice system. And it's like, if it's a partner or somebody who's going through maybe addiction or mental health problems, your first choice might not be to like subject that person to like grotesque and inhumane punishment. I mean, in Oklahoma County, you end up at the Oklahoma County Jail, which is one of the most inhumane places on the planet. And so, yes, you might want this person you're having a conflict with to stop. You might want them to resolve it differently. You might want them to do something. But like calling the cops maybe isn't in your best interest or in your family's best interest or in the interest of the person that is you're in conflict with. And so none of what this panel talks about, none of what, the whole debate to date is talking about resolves any of that. It's all about jurisdiction and kind of a peen match between district attorneys and the state of Oklahoma and the tribes. And again, I think like the base argument here is that doesn't get talked about is Oklahoma doesn't do a good job at this. Like our county jail, I mean, in Oklahoma County and in Tulsa, are the two like largest mental health facilities in the state. So we're just locking up people who have mental health issues. We have huge problems with addiction, and so we're sending all these people to these places with no resources, with no help, and subjecting them to this. And instead of addressing that and maybe getting our own house in order, our governor is fighting with the tribes, who, by the way, are investing heavily in upgrading their courts and expanding how much they can process. I mean, like they're dealing with this, and that's the other part that doesn't get reported very much, and definitely doesn't get talked about by the governor and other stuff is like they have court systems. They were a lot smaller before McGirt because they didn't need to deal with this stuff, but now that they are getting, that they have to deal with this, they're hiring judges and expanding and getting set up so that they can deal with what's coming.